Today's focus is going to be on the strategy and tactics document, and we're going to be led in the discussion by Comrade Natwa. Comrade Nati is the chairperson of the ANC NEC Subcommittee on Political Education. He takes us through the strategy and tactics document, which is really the base document of the ANC. And this discussion is supposed to assist us also understand and comprehend how the ANC thinks, why it thinks the way that it does, and the strategy and tactics document speaks to that. So, Comrade Nati, if I may please invite you to the podium.
Thank you, Kusela, and good morning, everyone. Let me start rather on a somber note on the passing on of Stumo Mafela, just expressing our condolences to the family and friends of one of the most outstanding artists in our land. May his soul rest in peace. So the discussion today, as Kusela has said, is on a strategy and tactics. I want to perhaps start by making two assumptions. That the first one is that would be engaging on something or a document we've gone through over a week since last time we were here when they were introduced. Secondly, that it really has to be a discussion on strategy and tactics, not on the day-to-day issues which would come but not form part of the thrust of our discussion. Because I think I need to start by saying that the preparations, as you know, for the 54th National Conference is in motion, as you were part of the 9 discussion documents which we unveiled last week here. And amongst those documents, there's the one on strategy and tactics, which seeks fundamentally to outline broadly what we call in the movement the balance of forces, both domestically and globally. And analysis, or this one in particular, helps us broadly to zoom in on the state of social agency as a propeller of the national democratic revolution, as well as raising the levels of reflections on the organization as a strategic factor in this current epoch. We thought we needed to lift the question of organization because whatever would follow will depend largely on the level and the stage of organization. Arising from this, you will notice that this document in particular, its thematic framework, is premised on organization in line with the society was striving for, as asserted in the 52nd National Conference. And the society we are striving for is a national democratic society. In all, you have about seven key areas within the document, and one of those is the capturing of the beachhead. But perhaps before we go any further, particularly on that, I want to draw you, if you have the documents with you, or if you don't, you note this, that from the very onset on the document, we make the point about rapid modernization of technology and developmental convergence among some regions contain possibilities for improving human conditions. Attached to this are changing economic power balances in favor of the developing countries and the new trends in economic partnerships. That would be point 6. I would also want to point to you on the other aspect, few of them, point 7, which, and I quote, states, on the other hand, the global economic crisis which started with the financial meltdown in 2007 underlines the flaws of neoliberal ideology and praxis. The world is experiencing a polycrisis reflected in rapacious conduct of finance capital, signs of secular stagnation in production and trade, degradation of the environment, and further marginalization of regions in the periphery of global capitalism. Accompanying these multiple crises is the declining legitimacy of both political and business elites the world over. This is a consequence, we argue, of the inability of these elites to address the fundamental question of social inequality, declining social ethics, and the mismanagement of such global challenges as migration and terrorism. We also raised the point that we have seen the ascendancy of narrow nationalism globally. You would have noticed with the recent elections all over the world, especially in the developed nations of Europe and the United States and so on. And this particular point underlines the failure of your orthodox elites and leadership the world over. Selfish geopolitical pursuits and the rise of security industrial complex threaten to worsen global tensions and plunge the world into a devastating inferno. Across the world, we are making the point here about the weaknesses of civil society the world over, especially progressive forces of the world. And the point we are making is that they are weak either because they've been co-opted to the agenda of the status quo, or generally they are weak because of being unable to deal with the social challenges which their society face. You will see on point 11 we are making the point here that we have this gap at the global core of social discord is the fundamental question of political economy, the distribution of income and asset in society. And we say this is what we're experiencing around the globe, but the acute manifestation of this inequality is felt by humanity here in South Africa. This is where poverty and unparalleled opulence live cheek by jowl. We then get into the capturing of the beachhead, and this section deals particularly with the historical evolution of our society and its transition. In this chapter, point is made that whilst containing transitional clauses, the 1996 Constitution was on the whole representing an untrammeled majority rule, profound to socio-economic provisions. And the point we're making here is that far from being a compromised document, as it were, we think and we assert that this is a document in line with the society we are building. And in this sense, the ideals it propounds are not a compromise, but are consistent with the objective to create a society underpinned by profound humanism. We then delve in the character of the National Democratic Revolution. And here, this section spells out clearly the type of society we are building, which is, as our strategic objective, a society based on non-racialism, non-sexism, democratic, and united. And this society is a society, we say, that foregrounded by our own perspective and discussions in the 52nd National Conference, that it is going to be a national democratic society. Briefly, when we get to the vision of our collective effort, and that is the character of the National Democratic Revolution, we start here, amongst others, on the point and reiterating the fact that colonialism of a special type contained with it such contradictions that could not be reformed. It had to be destroyed. And to the extent that the democratic dispensation has traversed on the path would be determined by how we've been able to destroy the relations of colonialism of a special type. We also make a point about the National Democratic Revolution as defined precisely because it seeks to abolish this combination of sources of social conflict. It has a national and democratic task, and it should strive to realize shared prosperity, social justice, solidarity, premised primarily on the unity of the state we are building and inclusivity. We further make a point about the unity and diversity and the kind of identity which South Africa should be seized with. And that kind of identity, we assert that it should be an identity which leads all of us to a united African nation, adding to the diversity and identity of the continent and humanity at large. We further, on the character of the NDR, restate the content of the National Democratic Revolution. We say the content of the National Democratic Revolution is the liberation of Africans in particular and blacks in general from the political and socio-economic bondage. It means, in practical terms, uplifting the quality of life of all South Africans, especially the poor, the majority of whom are African and female. At the same time, it has the effect of liberating the white community from the false ideology of racial superiority and the insecurity attached to oppressing others. The hierarchy of the disadvantage suffered under apartheid will naturally inform the focus of the programs of change and the attention paid particularly to those who occupy the lowest ranks of society. And again, as we continue on this matter of the NDR, we talk of the eradication of what we see in our society as a patriarchal oppression, that it cannot be assumed. It cannot be assumed that because we are in a democracy, therefore everybody would then be part and parcel of the process of fighting this very fundamental social ill in our society, the patriarchal power relations. And we say that precisely because of this oppression was embedded in economic, social, and religious, cultural, family, and other relations in all society, it has to be eradicated. All manifestations and consequences of patriarchy from the feminization of poverty, physical and psychological abuse, undermining of self-confidence, to open the hidden forms of exclusion from positions of authority and power need to be eliminated. So we're saying that much as we enjoy the fruits of democracy, but so much work still needs to be done in ensuring that we indeed create a gender equal society. We also raise the issue of the role and the place of the youth in our society, basically raising the point of this energy of youth which need to be harnessed so that in a positive and directed in a positive way, so that as society, all of us embark on a program of empowerment and development of young people. We also raise the issue of people living with disability. And on that, we are saying that we should not only look at them only from a point of view of social welfare, but we need to look at the right of each individual to dignity and development, and of the contribution of each can make to the collective good of society. And we say what is important here is the implementation of the programs which have been outlined above, that the systematic program to correct historical injustice and affirm those deliberately excluded under apartheid on the basis of race, class, and gender becomes fundamental. We move on the point of the NDR and raise the point we have raised earlier on about the need to eradicate and destroy the apartheid legacy and relations, as it were. That unless we deal with those things, whatever we're raising, including our programs such as social cohesion, would not be realized. On that front, we are asserting that the social cohesion in the national democratic society will also depend on the extent to which rights of those in the lower ranks of socioeconomic ladder are protected. Such a society should proceed from the obvious premise that workers' rights are human rights, and these rights should find expression in law-governed resources, in law-governed measures to ensure decent jobs, job security, and a living wage. In broad terms, the National Democratic Revolution seeks to ensure that every South African, especially the poor, experiences the improving of the quality of life. It seeks to build a developmental state shaped by the history and socio-economic dynamics of South African society. Such a state will guide national economic development and mobilize domestic and foreign capital and other social partners to achieve this goal. It will have such attributes as the capacity to intervene in the economy in the interest of higher rates of growth and sustainable development. The effecting sustainable programs that address challenges of unemployment, poverty, and underdevelopment with the requisite emphasis of vulnerable groups, and mobilize the people as a whole, especially the poor, to act as their own liberators through participatory and representative democracy. We then look at the changing balance of forces domestically. And the first point we are making, firstly, that this chapter looked at the balance of forces and analyzing that from the point of the 1994 breakthrough to date. It looks at the constraints and challenges, but also positives as we dealing with historical injustice. Firstly, we quote here on point 73 that in the early years of the democratic dispensation, it became necessary to contain various forces, very negative, some threatening with violence to society, and being a society coming and having experienced violence and its effect. Our tactical move was that one of the sunset clause. And the sunset clauses themselves helped us to capture the beachhead. And from there, whatever came from the forces opposed to change could not be sustained. It helped us because as we did that, we frustrated them with the compromise on the security machinery of the state and on the program of reconciliation. And that program disorganized them. At the same time, I must say that it has been disappointing that those who would have been beneficiaries of the project of reconciliation have not or did not play their part in full in accepting the gesture from the progressive change which our country was experiencing. We look at the democratic government inheriting the economy, and we look at this economy, that it was the economy dominated by monopoly capital with a few white-owned conglomerates owning large swathes of critical sectors. The optimistic assumptions about a post-apartheid dividend were not borne out by reality, as little new investment, both domestic and foreign, flowed into the economy. Instead, several large corporations sought to diversify by relocating their primary listings and headquarters from South Africa. And whilst they do this, and despite the policy positions articulated by democratic government, a narrative about policy uncertainty was propagated and sustained beyond the country's borders. In addition, all manner of obstacles was placed to block the new entrance. This aggravated the fiscal and monetary crisis that had affected country during the last days of apartheid. We are then saying that our transition was fraught with compromises, and those compromises, we believe that they enabled us to accelerate the process of change. But where we are now, we raise a point about the political liberation, having presented opportunities to right the historical injustice. Some progress, we assert, has been made in this direction. South Africans' quality of life has significantly improved, but the fundamental essence of apartheid colonialism remains. It's precisely because of all this that in 2012, in our the last national conference of the ANC, the 53rd national conference of the ANC, made a call for the second phase of transition to a national democratic society. Without deliberate and targeted interventions, current social relations can only reproduce themselves. The issue is whether there is sufficient capacity and will for such a step for change. And we are raising the point here of the weakness of the liberation movement currently, and that the ANC and its alliance partners, as well as the government, are at its weakest point if the elections we come from are anything to go by. And we elaborate on this matter that part of this are the issues we have raised about internal squabbles, whether it's money politics, whether it's factionalism, and so on. And these are the things we are saying that they are not helping the movement to move forward as we're supposed to as the African National Congress. We also raised the point broadly in the alliance that the working class organization has declined, having achieved a lot in the new dispensation, but we've seen the decline currently. We also make a point about the postulation that in the second decade of freedom, liberation movement lose power. We're saying that that's not a natural trajectory. It is a function of factors, particularly subjective factors, as we've outlined, and to the extent that the liberation movement is able to correct that, we'll be able to move forward, leading society as the liberation movement. So therefore, we are dispelling and debunking that myth that it's inevitable. You can't do anything. I think, and we say here in the document, the African National Congress and its allied forces do stand a chance of self-correction. And we raise on this other part the centrality of social agency. And here, this refers to mainly the motive forces of the revolution. As we have said in the past and continue to say, that the working class is at the helm, and it's one class which very much so stand to benefit with the success of the national democratic revolutions. And black workers, both employed and unemployed, urban and rural, remain this key motive force of process of change. You will also have other section, the middle strata, which also play a critical role in this. We look at the issue of the political leadership, and we have said that to the extent that the liberation movement is not able to deal with the organizational challenges which we alluded to, we will find ourselves in a difficult position to maintain and sustain power as the African National Congress. And on this, we have 4 areas we are concentrating on, which we say should form part of this self-correction. Firstly, the revitalization and the shoring up of the visionary and policy integrity of the movement. And this requires clarity of purpose and the measure of theory and practice. Against this backdrop of the changing society and opponents that seek to appropriate the language of change, reliance on technical number crunching about quantity elements of delivery will not do. Transformation should find expression in the circulation of long-term vision of the new civilization of social relations in the southern tip of Africa. The second point we're making on this relate to the integrity of the systems of managing membership. and leadership. And here we say that if we do not pay attention on this matter, or rather if we pay attention to this matter, we'll be able to change the misfortunes which have visited the liberation movement. But if we don't and remain with our systems lacking integrity, we will have a problem. We also deal with the issue of leadership as the third area of focus on this matter. And on the leadership, we emphasize what would be contained in the Through the Eye of the Needle, that it is about time that we look very carefully on the process of selecting leadership in the African National Congress. That if we miss this, it is not going to be in the best interest of the organization. Amongst the things we are looking to in the principles of leadership is selflessness. The kind of leaders who are going to be able to serve the people and the organization. The leadership which also has integrity and taking responsibility in ensuring that their quality as leaders is always improved ideologically, academically, and ethical attributes. The fourth area is the integrity of the technical systems, be they the membership system of the organization, its improvement, and so on, be it information and communications technologies, be it the infrastructure or communication in the current age becomes important to deal with. On the global balance of forces, this chapter deals with the balance of forces at the global scale. As it says, it does point to the influence that capitalism holds currently and the slow rising of the progressive forces. At the center of humanity's challenges is the fundamental question of political economy, the distribution of income. According to some research globally, more wealth is owned by the richest 1% than the rest of humanity. And 8 men now own the same amount of wealth as the poorest half of the world, Oxfam 2017. In many developed countries, large swathes of the population have, in the recent period, actually experienced stagnant incomes and a declining quality of life. The crisis of capitalism also finds expression in the collapse of ethics or greater public exposure of such deplorable practices, from cooking of the books, willful violation of financial regulations, vehicle defeats devices, to circumvent environmental regulations, to massive and undeserved packages to many executives, and in some instances, actual looting of the fiscus. All these developments have undermined the legitimacy of many polities in the eyes of majority of citizens of the world. In relation to our continent, Africa, our point of departure is informed by the following understanding that the combination of the bustling global economy and a new core of continental leaders with people's interest at heart set the stage for the revival of African economies and improvement in the quality of life in most countries. By the turn of the second decade of the century, 7 of the fastest growing economies in the world were located in Africa, though at the lower base. Whilst the global economic crisis negatively affected most African countries, the Africa Rising narrative seems to still capture the long-term trend. Africa's trade with the rest of the world has grown massively, foreign debt has declined, the labor productivity has improved. Critically, these advances have found expression in such social indicators as improved income, lower rates of unemployment, reduction in poverty, higher rates of enrollment in primary education, and lower rates of under-5 mortality. Ebbs and flows of commodity prices and isolated negative incidents in the political arena do not subtract from the new trajectory the continent has set for itself, as articulated in AU Agenda 2063. The continent seeks to attain prosperity based on sustainable development, democracy, and citizen activism, good and ethical governance, as well as multifaceted integration and peace. This vision builds on early initiatives to bring about African Renaissance. Infrastructure programs and consumer spending are expected to intensify. Agriculture is expected to benefit from the fact that 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land is found on the continent already, as in banking and communications. The continent is showing signs of leapfrogging some stages of technological development. Several countries are actively taking advantage of offshoring of production sites to become part of global manufacturing value chains. The fate of South Africa, we assert here that it's inextricably linked to the continent's future. Indeed, the progress that the continent has made in the past 20 years has redoubled to South Africa's advantage. This is reflected in investment, trade, and the innovation system, peace operations, and so on. The last section on the second phase of transition, having identified the successes and failures since the attainment of democracy, the ANC in 2012 came to the conclusion that South Africa needed to move to a new phase of transition to the National Democratic Society. This phase should be characterized by decisive action to effect thorough-going economic transformation and democratic consolidation. In analyzing our society, the current draft of the strategy and tactics makes the following observations, and I quote: our definition of colonialism of a special type identifies three interrelated antagonistic contradictions: class, race, and patriarchal power relations. These antagonisms found expression in national oppression based on race, class superexploitation directed against black workers on the basis of race, and triple oppression of the mass of women based on their race, their class, and their gender. It continues, quote, South Africa represents the most acute manifestation of most of the social fault line that define humanity's current challenges: race, class, gender, and geographic location. Income inequality and inequitable distribution of assets are at their most intense. Poverty and unparalleled opulence live side by side. What clearly is demonstrated in the assertions made by the document is the deep-seated relationship between political oppression and the apartheid capitalist system and its legacy, that if decisive action is not taken to deal with economic subjugation and exclusion, the essence of apartheid will remain, with a few black men and women incorporated into the courtyard of privilege. The old fault lines will persist and social stability will be threatened. Despite the daunting challenges that our country continues to face, the South African government and the society at large has done some good work. The strategy and tactics captured the point very well, and it says, and I quote, "In this regard, South Africa's effort at fundamental change represents a social experiment which resonates with humanity's progressive endeavors, as in the past when it touched the conscience of humanity. South Africa is a giant social laboratory. The success or failure of whose undertakings has global implications," close quote. At the core of ANC tasks in the current period is the renewal of the organization, for it to exercise this societal leadership we've painted above. The National Democratic Society we are building is going to be a society based on the best in human civilization in terms of political and human freedoms, socio-economic rights, value system and identity. To all the members of the African National Congress and the public at large, we say it is the task of all the cadres to unpack these themes and make their introspection, reflect on the points we are making, correct some of the things, and affirm some of or others which they feel need to be affirmed. But most importantly, for us, it is the time of reflection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Comrade Nathi for that extremely comprehensive summary and unpacking the strategy and tactics document. I think as you go through the documents, this is an ongoing process of engagement, of reflection, like you're saying. We are on this platform, we're engaging with structures of the ANC to ensure that ultimately what society in general comes up with is our own common understanding of the challenges that face a country and what we need to do. So I will open up for question in this Festival of Ideas so we can begin to interrogate the issues that have been raised. Yes, sir, at the back.
Sorry, Ed Sauter with Borders News. I see in the document, number 223 talks about distribution of land. And you talk about how land redistribution and restitution will be speeded up. You know, there's been some conflicting messages from various parts of the ANC about whether or not there's going to be whether or not there's going to be a move to expropriation without compensation. And I was just wondering if you could give us just some details of perhaps the thinking around that and how the government would like to speed up the process of land reform. Thanks.
Thank you. Number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Okay, those will be the last hands for this round. We'll come back. William?
Thank you very much. William Gambi from ENCA. Could I ask you to expand a little bit on where you state that is there will and capacity to implement the program of radical economic transformation when the ANC, its alliance, and the government it leads are at its weakness? That's an admission on your part. So the question therefore is, and unfortunately I will have to use an example of the day-to-day occurrences that we are witnessing in the recent past. Yesterday, your alliance partner, COSATU, came out very, I think, sharply, stating that the issue, saying that the SASA issue relating to the grants and the Temesa issue are glaring and were completely avoidable. I'm using their words here. And that this points to the weaknesses in government. And these are the weaknesses that you yourself point to. And therefore, perhaps the question will be, how and can the ANC change course? And could perhaps the solution lie in part with the quality of leadership that you speak about? And the last question on leadership, you're saying that it's about time that the ANC looks very carefully at selecting leadership. Is the ANC saying this perhaps in light of what it has experienced in the recent past, and perhaps what could be some of those weaknesses that you've identified as far as leadership is concerned. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my question. It's Monoro from the New Age. On the issue relating to the possibility for the ANC to be relegated to the dustbin of history, you have now dismissed that particular possibility, and it comes against the background of a bruising local government election defeat for the ANC in 3 key metros. Do you not think that your statement perhaps undermines the political headwinds facing the party? In other words, is the ANC burying its head in the sand on challenges confronting it? Thank you.
Thank you. For Sis Wilson.
Lucy Chimamanda from the SABC. I was just interested in the fact that you lamented the fact that the beneficiaries of some of the sunset clauses and the compromises that have been made have not actually played their part in terms of actually almost returning the favor. And we've seen that, especially this week with the kind of rhetoric about how colonialism wasn't bad for everybody. How do you mean to turn this around? As the ANC, you've spoken about non-racialism, but I'm not sure if, from a practical point of view, there's actually a plan to going forward. That's the first thing. The second one, which is related to it, is the idea of the fact that there is an investment. The white community is not investing in this country. Business is not investing in this country. There's very little that you can do to bring about economic transformation as long as there is this kind of investment boycott. What is the plan?
Thank you.
Good morning, Alvin Simpia from SABC TV News. My first batch of questions are going to focus on the judiciary specifically. On paragraph 103, you speak about the lawfare that the country is currently facing and government is currently facing, where the ANC and the government that it leads has to be directed from elsewhere to do the right thing. What has led to this position where it seems as though that it is the judiciary that is in charge of running the country, and that the ANC-led government always finds itself in court, and it gets to court and it loses these cases. And speaking about losing these cases, lots and lots of money is spent on this, and there have been calls that expensive government litigation where government loses cases that some believe that are quite glaring that government will be losing those cases. Shouldn't the incumbent ministers or those heading those departments be asked to pay the price or the cost of the litigation themselves? On the issue of the transformation of the judiciary, this document doesn't emphasize around the transformation of the judiciary in terms of getting more black judges onto the bench. But on the backdrop of that, this document as well doesn't speak about getting young black law practitioners and advocates, senior counsels to represent government, because you look at the cases that government take to court, and always its senior counsels are white senior counsels. Why is it that government doesn't have confidence in black senior counsels? That will be for now. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Just one last one. Also in the judiciary. In paragraph 206, there is talk of how these cases, the lawfare cases, how these cases are taken to court by what's called the privileged sector who access the judiciary. But what about the poor? What about the poor who can't access the judiciary? What should happen to them? Because there's also, in cases where they feel that they've been let down by government, but they don't have anywhere else to go but the office of the public protector, who also feels at this point that she has too much on the table. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Comrade Nati?
Is it working? Oh. No. Okay.
Sorry.
Thanks, Kusel, and thanks for the questions. I think the first question would be best answered by referring you to Section 25 of the Constitution. And that section quite clearly raises one fundamental point that the land, if it's distributed for the good of society and for the interest of the populace at large, it should be equitable and so on. The point we're making here is that what in the past we adopted, the willing buyer or willing seller, has not worked for obvious reasons. I mean, experience is there that we didn't experience much of willing seller in the process. So the legislation is the guide. Whatever emphasis or point of emphasis would make from time to time, it has to be within the parameters of the Constitution, because it gives the legislative arm of government to legislate on the matter on behalf of the population. Well, Oli, the issue about the capacity is the critique we are making to ourselves, that we have had periods in the past 2 decades where, for instance, we could have fast-tracked some of the changes which we wanted to see, which were making a point that as we reflect into the 2 decades of our freedom, we think that we can do something. The capacity, for instance, if you talk about the first question of the land, the issue has been, well, the buzzword, change the Constitution. And for that you need a 2/3 majority. But the section itself has nothing about changing of the Constitution. It has everything to do about our capacity and will to change things. And I think what you see Comrade Gukile Nkwindi doing, introducing the reforms he does, is precisely to respond to the questions of our capacity and will. Sometimes not will in the strictest sense, but perhaps taking things for granted. Because if, for instance, you wanted to change anything in the Constitution, at one point you had close to 70% support. So that's not an issue. The Constitution here is not an issue. It's what we need to do and focus on. Look, you see, there would be things. I'm not going to be drawn to specific matters. I know you are passionate about this. You spoke about it last week as well. But the point which I have to acknowledge is that in the process of execution of the transformation agenda, there would be inefficiencies, there would be defects. What becomes important for any revolutionary movement is to be able to identify and acknowledge the missteps which you may take from time to time, but set about to correct them. The question here is the extent to which you'll be committed to correct whatever mistakes you are faced with. I'm not saying directly to the issues we are talking about here, but I'm talking broadly that if you want to make an honest reflection about your strengths and weaknesses as a revolutionary movement, you should be as open and transparent as possible to yourself first, so that you do not develop a sense of denialism in the process. But at the same time, you are not saying what you are saying as you are confessing to the pastor in the church. But we are saying is so that we are able to correct that, as it were. Well, I think if you look at what we have raised, precisely, that we can't say that seated where we are and having elevated to a strategic level the issue of organization and the motive forces, we can't say that you are satisfied and comfortable with the input, some of which show weaknesses in how we confront societal challenges as leadership. And the point there is that we have the responsibility to ensure that we do everything ourselves as the leadership, to develop ourselves so that we are able to confront the challenges we are faced with. And we are saying the challenge of society and the leadership of society cuts across the array of forces in society, political, private sector, and so on and so forth. But this one is mainly a critique to ourselves. And we are making pointers as we dispel this postulation of a national liberation movement naturally having to lose power. And we are saying that there are things, there are factors, subjective factors, which of course would be influenced by objective factors out there, which we need to look into as a true revolutionary movement, because part of the reason why the movement has been able to be or reach the point we have reached of over a century is the fact that we have stuck to the true revolutionary principles. And amongst those is to always not be satisfied about the achievement you have made, want to do more. And for you to do that, you do this introspection of the subjective or subjectivity of the movement, as it were. So you are right. Quality of leadership is one of the things we are saying, but also look internally, how organizationally we've evolved, and how do we modernize the movement through its systems and so on and so forth, as we have suggested here. I think I've answered the question on the asked by New Age about it's not really burying our heads in the sand or our head in the sand. It's actually saying there is no science in asserting that naturally a liberation movement has to lose power after 20 years. Not scientific. That's the point we're making. And we're saying to ourselves and the entire liberation movement and the alliance that, well, there are things we need to do. Because if we do them, we're going to dispel this myth. But obviously, if we are not living to or rising to the occasion insofar as what we have pointed out, we definitely would be in a serious quagmire, including losing power. So it's within our capacity as the movement to forge ahead with our process at the helm of society, or reverse the gains of the National Democratic Revolution. You know, we need to continuously focus on Busi, on the kind of society we want to build, without undermining weaknesses. And the kind of society we want to build is a non-racial society. We have serious challenges currently, because if we don't understand that we inherited a state without a nation, we'll miss the point. As we ascended to political office in 1994, whilst you had a state, an apartheid stated that you didn't have a nation. You had different groupings, ethnic groups, whites, blacks, this, that, and the other. The project of nation building started in essence post-1994. And we have no illusion that that is going to be an easy process, because would be undermining the effects and the legacy of white supremacy, which unfortunately some of our countrymen and women are hell-bent to ensure that overtly or covertly assert that fact. That is why we raised the point that reconciliation is a two-way process. It cannot succeed if all the parties are not playing the ball. In fact, perhaps we were supposed to talk about conciliation, because reconciliation presupposes that there was a conciliation which never materialized, so we reconciled, you know. Be that as it may, the posture has been there from the majority of the democratic forces for change, but the attitude of some of the white compatriots have been problematic. Some have been overt in their racist tendencies, others covert. I think the saga around Helen Zille is one case in point of the real attitude of some of the South Africans. Whilst cosmetically they would be coming in a particular way or want to be understood in a particular way, but what they do covertly proves to be something else. So there wouldn't be any meaningful social cohesion and true nation building when we have not addressed the issue of economic justice. It cannot be. We will do our best, but that area has to be attended to. What the ANC then said in the 53rd National Conference about the radical socio-economic transformation becomes so true and so relevant today, as it were. The point about the lawfare we are making here is what we started in the National General Council in 2015. That indeed there are instances where government sometimes has been found wanting, insofar as whether it's the legislation or the approach to different issues affecting society, found to be corrected by courts. Which courts is their right to do that, and they should do that, and so on. But we're making another point that also we are alive to the fact that there are some amongst us in society who will do everything possible to block transformation of society, using courts amongst other things. And we say we're striking a balance between the two, that they should be unpegged for what they are, so that if government has to change its ways insofar as the cases which is losing is a point we are raising. But also, we are saying that there is an issue about people who would want to suck up the judiciary in matters which are political, which could have been engaged politically and resolved, but always go to court and so on. Well, the matter of the judiciary, as you would have noticed in depth from a point of view of the peace and stability, is a matter touching on it not in detail from a point of view of the strategy and tactics. It cannot be. When we talk transformation of society, when we talk socio-economic transformation, we're talking transformation of all social stations. There is no part we should be holy cow in this judiciary involved or as part of that. I would not go into a specific matter of who is employed for government in cases and so on, because I know that you will have some Africans and some black people from the legal fraternity representing government, as it were. If your criticism and challenge to us is that the majority of those people are white, it's a matter which perhaps would have to discuss in that particular way. But I know from experience that there are departments which are using Africans and black lawyers. Thank you.
Sorry,
well, you would know, as we're dealing with the strategy and tactics, that the relationship between labor and capital is that one of unity and struggle of the opposite. To that extent, government under the African National Congress will always engage capital from that point of view, because we need each other for economic growth, for the development of society, but we struggle against each other when it comes to such things as investment boycott, which you experience in the country. At the level of economic transformation is one of the areas which have been looked into. But what is important here is that our approach is to try and seek partnerships in society and raise even those things which we are diametrically opposed between the state, labor sometimes, and capital. So for us, it's an ongoing battle, especially because we are dealing with people who are consciously engaging in that particular conduct, which in essence undermine or show lack of confidence in the development of their own society. Thanks.
Okay, I see hands when I was going to close. Right, I will note the first round. This round. Let's make your questions as succinct as possible. Number one, lady at the back. Number two, Prof, you had your hand up?
Yes.
Okay. Number 4, number 5, and then Eldrin, you'll close it for us. Can I start with number 1, you, ma'am?
Thank you very much. My name is Giovanni Majani from ANN7. Question is in regards to the black-white unity. This weekend, higher education had a convention, and they had even gone to say that Minister Blade Nzimande has betrayed the cause of free, decolonized, black-centered education by inviting the AfriForum, as they are based as a racist organization. That's the first question. Second question is in regards to the weaknesses that you've stated. Do you think that opposition is almost putting salt into the wound by accusing Minister Mahlobo for being behind the break-in at the office of the Chief Justice? Thank you.
That last question, you relating it to strategy and tactics, or?
Yes, they've said they've noticed the weaknesses. So do you think that at every point opposition wants to set up a narrative that almost reveals these weaknesses or puts salt into the wounds, such as the break-in now with Minister Mahlobo?
Great, okay. Number 2.
Thank you, Kole, again. On losing power, you state that it's not a natural trajectory. But my question therefore will be, why would then the ANC develop a document on how to manage coalitions if it is not indeed on its way to losing power? Number 2, on self-correction, you clear there that you need to look again into the integrity of processes in as far as membership and perhaps on issues of leadership are concerned. I will draw your attention once more to the Andle issue, which to a certain extent, it went as far, or it went straight to the head of the ANC at the level of the top 6, where we saw 2 leaders of the party. One going there to essentially endorse, if you like, Andile Lungisa's election, and the other is saying, no, but the processes have been
Your question on self-correction.
Question on self-correction, therefore, is the ANC serious when it says it wants to self-correct, when you have glaring examples like the Andile Lungisa matter? Just lastly, therefore, on the issue of lawfare, my colleague asked this question. I would like to draw your attention on one instance where the current deputy president of the ANC, Sir Ramaphosa, was at the Marikana inquiry, where he was lambasted by a very well-known lawyer in this country, Dumisa Nzeleza, for having a lily-white legal team. And perhaps the question, therefore, would be, how committed truly are leaders of the ANC, never mind government, but are leaders of the ANC, in seeing to it that black lawyers receive the same prestige, if you like? Thank you.
Thank you. Lee? That's it.
Yeah, let me state a different take on some of the concerns that emerged from my colleagues who are analyzing issues. They have suggested that the ANC is very good in identifying weaknesses. But I think one way in which you solve the problems is to make the weaknesses very visible. And sometimes you should not always have the answer, because the answer will come from the people. So I do not share that view. But the issue that I want to raise is how success becomes also a weakness, or how the ANC's weaknesses are derived from its success, and how the ANC should actually get comfortable with that. And to do that, I will remind you of a statement that was made by the president of this country during the NGC, where he was trying to remind members of the SACP and COSATU that the ANC is not COSATU, and the SACP and the ANC is not SACP, and that they all pursue different agendas and focus. And he actually suggested that the SACP should also understand that there'll come a time when the ANC will say, we've reached our destination and we can wish you good luck, but we'll keep on checking on you how you're doing in terms of creating a socialist society. But our position is this. But I'm prefacing this to create a sense of comfort in how you're going to respond to my question. And the question has to do with the contradictions within the ANC. You see, one of the things that you talked about is the element of liberation. and the people and the rule of apartheid and colonialism. There are members of the ANC who are capitalists, and apartheid made it difficult for them to be capitalist. There are members of the ANC who are socialist, and apartheid made it difficult for them to do that. There are members of the ANC who are nationalist, and apartheid made it. So when you destroy apartheid, you are also liberating members of the ANC to pursue what they want to pursue. So the idea of a broad church might, in the long run, not be sustainable as people begin to feel freer to be themselves. And I sympathize with your idea of thinking that you can keep everybody in the same room. But if you look at the broad body of opinion, in 1994, the ANC got around 62%. And more than 20 years later, it gets the same number. But what has happened is that the broad body of opinion has been more progressive than negative, even though with the fortunes of the ANC going down, in the sense that if you look at Parliament, you have offshoots that came from the ANC, groupings that are somewhat dissatisfied, but in terms of thinking, there has not been changes. And when you look at the opposition, it has been regrouping of people who never voted for the ANC at all. So what I'm saying is that at the moment, you're going to be spending more time trying to manage the contradictions. And part of your success is also to let certain people to go. Then the second issue related to that is what you said about how some people within the ANC, I mean, I like your analysis of starting with when you deal with balance of forces, dealing with balance of forces at the global level, at the national level, and within the organization. The ANC must also have the courage to let certain groupings go, because some of them are actually captured, and you're not going to do anything about them. And you'll be wasting too much energy in trying to keep them in. So your success can also be about letting people go. Then on the issue of lawfare, there's some issue that I want to raise, and it's more about the issue of courage. There is a posture that is being given strength, especially in the media, that suggests that the courts are there to co-govern. And I don't think the ANC makes that very clear. Yes, there should be arbiters where there are disputes, but where there is an encroachment, and I think the Chief Justice himself has also raised an issue about encroachment, that space must be protected jealously. But I don't find the organization coming out being very strong and courageous. Then the last point I want to make is the notion of narrative. You know, one of the amazing things that you find in this country, we are all drawn to the word crisis. And part of it derives itself from the white supremacy that always suggested that once black people take over, you should always expect that there'll be a crisis. So we spend most of our time looking for crisis. And if we can't see a crisis, we imagine it and almost create it, because it's in our, that's what the root had said to us, that you'll always be third class in everything. And I wish we could find a way where the ANC, as it claims to be a leading member of society and all that, begins to shape the sense of confidence that we should have. Where there are solutions, there should not be a crisis. And I'm always amazed that people will tell you that there's a solution, but then they talk about the crisis. When are we going to get out of this notion of a crisis mode? Because every time you have a committee that gets formed, it must have a crisis in it for it to be taken seriously. We'll never create committees that are problem solving. We create committees that seem to be obsessed with creating interest, but it's a sense that we have adopted the freedom prescription on us where we are under constant self-doubt. And when you look at all other countries, they have problems, but they never, whenever they have a crisis, it's never an Armageddon. It is always, how do you bring the best to solve the problem? But our attitude is very different. And I wish, as the totality of your submissions begins to show that we are here to make sure that South Africa succeeds, rather than to spend most of the time in terms of why it should not succeed.
Great, thank you very much. I had a hand here for here. Well, don't look at me like that. I allowed Prof because you were coming back for the second time. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Florie Manovich from Netwerk 24. I just wanted to find out, if you say in terms of the sunset clauses should help the program of reconciliation, but the white partners in this agreement did not come to the table. In retrospect, were these sunset clauses a mistake?
Okay.
And then also with regards to land reform, so you said now it's in essence about policy and how it would be implemented. But Minister Guguling Quinty did say that there should be looked at like one legislation that will look at, for instance, the land expropriation or land reform without compensation. But to be able to do that, you would have to amend the constitution. So will the ANC take up a more radical stance in terms of this? Because it has been said, the President has also been speaking about land reform without compensation, but when you look at the discussion documents in terms of that, that radical element does not come across. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Siri?
Thank you. Just a very short, tiny little one. About the growing black middle strata. You know, it seems to remain an elusive thing as far as the ANC is concerned. I just wanted to get thoughts around what is it about strategy this time around that will be different in trying to capture the middle class that doesn't seem to care about the politics. Because I think last week, Minister Fikile Mbalula was saying, you know, the documents in essence.
And just picking up on what the Prof said earlier, while there is now in these documents an emphasis around how do you make sure that you get legal. What is absent though is what happens once that person has been elected into a certain position, because communities would have played a role in getting that person elected into that position. And the document itself whether you are meeting your deliverables. Now, this is from the ANC's point of view, not from a government perspective, in terms of making sure that policies are being implemented and the people are abiding to the rule of law. On the question around state capture, in paragraph 154 and 215, there's an issue that's acknowledged around state capture, where it speaks about capturing the state. 154 speaks about private interests to capture and control not only the state forward but also. And my concern about this is that you have this in the document, in the strategy and tactics document of the ANC, but the ANC has never acknowledged publicly that there have been attempts to capture the state and gave examples of those attempts to capture the state. Apart from the Public Protector's report, which in itself only also doesn't make solid findings of state capture. Is this not a danger in itself? And the question around the alliance, the document speaks about the tripartite alliance, and it doesn't speak about making an issue around this, that why is it all the time that they seem to be the stepchild in the alliance? Is it the case that the committee, the focusing of strategy and tactics, does not believe that SAMCO has a role to play in communities where it feels that the ANC is using legitimacy there are constant protests, service delivery protests against ANC councillors. And then the final question is on the growing middle class, or the growing middle strata. And it's quite interesting that that the ANC picks this up, that while there has been, while the gap between black and white in terms of income inequality has shortened, it's closing down, the gap is increasing amongst black communities themselves, where you find that black people amongst themselves, there are those who are earning far more than the lower poor. Just some analysis from how did you manage to pick this up, and what does it mean? Does it point to a place where the policies that the ANC currently has to deal with income inequality does not deal with how do we get even the poor black people up to also make sure that they enjoy the fruits of democracy?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Comrade Nati?
If Aldrin can repeat the first question.
Around
the essence of the first question.
Essence of incumbency and leadership assessment.
Okay, so the first question is around what the Prof was mentioning earlier on, is that you don't have committees in place that are, you don't have a committee in place that is able to assess what's happening within government even before you get to a point of a pending crisis. Like for instance with the SASA issue, if there was a committee in place within the ANC and probably within government as well, that is looking at this court ruling that has been given, considering that we should be getting updates from the minister about what is happening, so that you have that, I just forgot what they call it in private companies, where you have a sit down annually and they look at a performance agreement. You have a performance agreement and they make the assessment whether you are meeting those deliverables.
Well, thanks, Adrian, and thanks to everyone. Giovanni, I think we need to make a point that Comrade Blade Nzimande is the leader of government. He's also at the helm of leadership of society. The criticism that he will speak to this or that group and not the other group is really flawed, because as leadership in society, with the posture which we have always espoused, whether in the Freedom Charter and in all other policy documents, building of partnerships in society is important. So I'm not going to meet with people you like only, but members of society have to be engaged. And I think that kind of a posture needs to be corrected, because it cannot assist any society as young as ours in trying to forge unity and build society. So there would be criticism, but there are no people who are not going to engage as government. Well, the issue of current news, you see, you know, in cabinet we have a program. When we've finished everything, we call current news. So you're drawing me on the current news now. I'm trying to, even as you were asking Kusela, how does this relate to the strategy and tactics? Some people out there in the street saying that they would say that sometimes thunderstorm dinner would come. They will say it's you. Do we really have to have a discussion about that? The point I would want to make about that particular example is that the law enforcement agency, we have all the confidence that they will do what it's supposed to be done. And that's all I can say about that point. No, Oli, you're missing the point. The coalitions which you are talking about and the paper on that is about the current. It's about the level, the tier, or the sphere of government, which is local government. As a result of the 3rd of August 2016, it's a forced situation upon the African National Congress. It's not about the national elections. The general elections, we are asserting here that the ANC has to do what it has to do to continue leading society. And we say it without any fear of contradiction that if we listen to these pointers, we're not going to have a problem as the African National Congress. Not at all. I see, you have this thing preparing to lose power. There's no such. We've got to correct and self-correct, and we have pointed out the things we need to do. We're not in any way preparing to lose power. And again, you are drawing me to anecdotes. And you raised this matter last week as well, of Comrade Lungisa, and you were responded to on that matter and so on. Again, you go to the Deputy President. You are a very difficult somebody, you see, because whereas you started on the engagement, on the strategic questions facing this society, this African National Congress, and globally, you decide, no, in your style, you must get into this. Because, you see, we can argue that today Oli can hire white lawyers, tomorrow he hire African lawyers or black lawyers. By the way, the Deputy President was not alone there in that commission. I was there. And conveniently, you leave that. It's the point I was making earlier on, that there is no rule in government that hire white lawyers only. There's no such a rule. This one will hire this one tomorrow and the other day. And I said, if the criticism is that the majority are white lawyers, let it be said. But to come up with a brush that, as you make the example about the Deputy President, and then that's the current in the ANC, it can't be true. Prof, I can't agree more with you on the points you are raising, and I think we should take the issue of the projection of the public discourse, moving from a crisis mode to that one of problem solving. But that would only succeed if you are able to talk to your friends you sit next to you because you see, the thing is that you would swear that there is no country in the world which is disastrous as South Africa. You get into countries, you see huge problems, and people are able to have a dialogue within society. Here at home, a whistle is blown, anything happens, a whistle is blown, out of proportion sometimes. In some instances, good to inform the public and everybody else. Just last year, one of the oldest democracies in the world, Sweden, came to exchange views with South African government on how to deal with issues of racism, which they see rearing their heads in their own countries. I've never heard people of Sweden going around and say, with their hands on their heads, crying loud, hey, we are a failed case. It's engagement is the compact with society on how do we solve the societal problems together. Not to act as if you are waiting for anything to happen. You can compare South Africa with any country. Being what it is, a nascent democracy, we have been able to make our contribution at a global scale, assisting other countries, precisely because we have what it takes to take society forward. And we will, as we build our democracy, find challenges as we go. And sometimes when you say to people, no, a young democracy becomes like a rhetoric until you get into specifics. That when you engage with all democracies, like Switzerland, for instance, who would be 725 years old, democracies, being a 23-year-old democracy, drawing parallels there, you get a sense that some amongst us in society want to assume South Africa to be at the level of old democracies, when you have fundamentals and legacies of colonialism of a special type which still have to be dismantled as we go forward. I think the moment we have a conversation as a society, all of us, which is more about helping all of us how to move out of the challenges we have, the better. You would know, Prof, that the contradictions have always been there in the broad church, precisely because it's the broad church, as you said, there are different interests and so on and so forth. But there has to be this glue which keeps the broad church together, because if that glue fizzles, you are correct, there would be no broad church. And the minimum program here is the National Democratic Revolution. And to what extent all of us are we committed to its acceleration would be a determining factor on this, as it were. At the time where we are, the unfortunate thing is that we want more people to come to the movement. You feel, as others do, that there are people who want to go and do as Chief Albert Lutuli say, let them go, let my people go. We can't let my people go. Ours is to ensure that we continue to, even the most incorrigible in society, we continue to engage them even outside of our own ranks, as it were. The sunset clauses, no, they were not a mistake. Sunset clauses were not a mistake. They were not. The context, firstly, there were two opposing sides fighting in South Africa. One resisting change, the other wanting change. And classically, when there is such a conflict, you decide that by seizure of power. At some point, the African National Congress was talking about the seizure of power. But the point which led us to sitting around the table was the acknowledgement that both the military might of apartheid could not destroy the liberation movement. Neither did the liberation movement liquidate the apartheid forces. So it was negotiations. And in the process of negotiations, you had elements, as I said, who were hell-bent to cause havoc and even to the extent of violence or violent approach to the discourse. And because of that, you were coming outside of statutory body as the liberation movement with people with machinery of state. You needed to convince people that we can coexist as South Africans. I'm saying it wasn't a mistake because we wouldn't have captured the beachhead, which we did. And it's that beachhead which sees South Africa today. It's the capturing of that beachhead which sees South Africa today being the kind of democracy we are. You know, Aldrin, the departments are fully fledged entities. Within them, they would have their own systems of monitoring and so on and so forth. I don't think it needs government per se, because only in instances like what has happened now, but to have a permanent mode, it goes back to the point, a permanent mode of crisis, there will be no way that you'll be able to accelerate the project of transformation. And for us, I think that we always have confidence in people and cadres who are deployed in areas of responsibility in our society. The capture you're referring to is not the capture the way you think of the capture. It's a natural relationship between the state and capital. And it's not a unique South African phenomenon. That you'll always have both sides, especially capital, wanting to have influence within the state or in the state. Vice versa, the state would really want to exert its hegemony, as it were. What was informing us here is that when you talk of the capture of the state, you have to be historical in South Africa, because whether we are talking about the British government vis-a-vis the role of Cecil John Rhodes in the Parliament of South Africa, there has always been that interface and interchange between the state and capital. What would be frowned at is when that capture works against the broader thrust of the transformation of society at a broader level. So when you say you have not acknowledged the capture, you don't have to acknowledge the capture. It's a natural occurrence between the two sides, both the state and capital, as it were. The state will only be able to discipline capital if it's in such a position that its authority and its integrity will be able to deal with capital, as it were. SANCO is not a stepchild alliance. You would know that the alliance has always been the tripartite alliance between the African National Congress, SABC, and COSATU. Later on, you have SANCO, which would always find expression in the documentation and the posture of the African National Congress. To that extent, there will always be a closer look on the matter of SANCO because it continues to be part and parcel of the broader democratic structures, progressive that is, which are working with the African National Congress. And an omission to them would mean that it has to be corrected. But if you look at how we were focusing on the alliance, which SANCO has not played that very key role. The issue I'm raising about the alliance mainly is the weaknesses within the alliance itself, and acutely within the tripartite alliance. That is why the emphasis has been on the tripartite alliance. Thank you, Kusama.
Just the one question, coordinated the black middle strata.
Oh, that was the, in fact, it's, look, you see the middle strata is the critical mass. So their voice, unlike perhaps others, they are mobile in terms of the expression of their opinions in society, precisely because of their location in society. So for the African National Congress, it's the same question like you would ask about the non-racial character of the African National Congress. That how do you continue to develop specific programs to attract all sections of society, be they on racial basis or on class basis, as it were. The African National Congress itself, as it's constituted, it's not without the middle strata. The point we've always raised within the ANC is that we have not recruited as much as we would want to. But it doesn't mean that you do not have the middle strata within the African National Congress. We are limping insofar as that point is concerned, of the mobilization of the middle strata. You would use different vehicles for different constituencies. And what the strategy and tactics is pointing out to is looking more at areas of modernization, ensuring that we are able to reach out to as many sectors as possible. So it becomes, it remains in the radar of the organization, but it doesn't necessarily say the fact that some in the middle strata are vocal out there does not necessarily conclude that the middle strata is akin to the African National Congress. Because if you look at the membership of the African National Congress, the majority, of course, would be your working people from the working class and so on. But you'll continue, you do have the people in the middle strata, in their majority in the African National Congress, but not to the extent that as the leadership and organization, with the voices of some of them, would be comfortable to leave some of them outside of the organization. To the extent of specific programs, it's a function of organizational renewal on the actual campaigns and programs to reach out and bolster the campaigns which are there already to reach out to the middle strata.
Okay, we've come to the end of our 2-hour marathon discussion. I want to thank everybody who participated. I do think that the discussions were robust, they were targeted, we spoke to the document. So thank you very much for that. We will meet again next Sunday, same time. We will be discussing organizational renewal, the organizational renewal document. Those of you who are on social media, we're also going to be engaging in a live chat with Comrade Nati from about 12:30 or so. So you are welcome to take some of those questions onto Twitter and Facebook, and he'll respond to them there. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Could we ask before the minister goes? He's the Minister of Arts and Culture. I felt, I don't know how on other points, I felt that you didn't pour out your heart here, Mr. One, as far as
Bullet. Okay, you'll get him on the sidelines, please.
Okay,
thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, Bo. Huh?
Can I get the card?
Oh, I don't have one here. Eh? Oh, Guys, I'm proud of you. You actually spoke strategy and tactics.
See, we can
wow.
Except, I didn't answer my one question.
The word about land? No, I think he felt it.
He wanted
That's why I didn't ask him again. Paulino Eldrin. Upi Ukel, Jovan. Okay, so in Niambe, so what do you want me to say? You want me to say to people?
But if
say
you